everybody to session 2 of Work Collaboratively with the Care Network and Other Services, CHCMHS004. So to begin with, I'll do the acknowledgement. In a spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in a spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nations people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Just go over our housekeeping. Cameras on, mics off whilst presenting, and use your hand emoji, please. And just remember at this time of the year, looking after yourself, please. And and just taking that as a bit of extra care. There's not too many well people around, so please look after yourself. All right, so tonight we're going to look at working relationships. How are they made effective by us? How do we use collaborative approaches? And what are the limits of abilities of people when we're working with them? And how are we accessing their skills and utilising resources? We're also looking at reviewing services and monitoring services and looking at the negotiations we would have to do and the advocacy that we do for our clients. So, establishing networks and local contacts. This is where your service and yourself, the workers, are physically out there going to other agencies, meeting the staff, seeing what their services deliver, talking to them about how you can collaborate with them to share resources, share staff skills, get the case management of certain clients. So one of your service mightn't quite have everything it needs, the resources for your client or participant, and you could have another agency that does. So networking with them, and you can optimize that service's ability to be able to meet the needs of individuals, because it's twofold. You've got two organisations happening here. And as mental health workers here, establishing networks and local contacts for you. You can also include your participants' family as well, because often many people like to bring their family along to support services because they're interested in what's going on. It's also a part of a supportive network for that person themselves. So when we're doing that, this is all about communication. You're building this holistic process here where you'll have networks supporting workers, supporting participants, supporting communities. So it becomes that real holistic approach. So how do you establish networks and local contacts, and who should it be? So think about medically, it's good to link in with certain professionals that you might be advising your participants to access. Always knowing about a good local GP for a lot of people, It's around, for people, it's about finding out about trust. And often people don't trust too many people outside of their own circle. And if they don't have supports, where do they go to find that? So knowing a GP within the network, and you can give that participant a little bit more encouragement that he has worked with people from the centre for a start, which is good. Excuse me. Some people need, of course, we need counsellors in the district. Some people medically need physio and other different specialists. Often it's easier to go to a GP and get that referral for people to then go on to physio and things like that. But knowing what's in your district is really important so you have access to them. So let's just go. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Can you refer as a like the kind of worker we're going to be? Can we refer ourselves to physios and things, or does it have to go through GP?
Oh, you don't have to go through GP. Yeah,
Okay.
we can just call up a physiotherapist and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not a
But
psychologist, and you would have to need GP for psychologists, would you?
often some don't.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Well,
some don't.
actually, yeah, for my kids, I think I just rang up now that you say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just that if you go to the GP, you might be also able to plan your health plan and
Okay.
get
Yeah.
your visits with that as well. Plus, they might know somebody they know somebody locally who works well with clients,
Yes.
and often they're a good source to find out other people.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so think about what other contacts do you think somebody would need coming from a family perspective for their extra needs, their different complex needs. So we've just mentioned psychologists. What about people with struggles with food? So dietitians. And what other supports would you think you would need to know about for your participants? Lucy?
Are you saying like what else that might come across that think they'd need to know when they come to use the service?
Just say they came to you and said, I'm really struggling with eating and keeping a healthy diet. Well, then we know of some dietitians, but once again, I would also be going, let's link you in with a GP because you could get your health checks through your healthcare plan.
Health checkup, and then
With the,
maybe
hmm. But
yeah,
what
it's
other
hard to
things do you think we need to know, be able to help our families with?
um I've gone a blank.
That's all right. You have a think.
Um
We'll come back to you.
you are
Lisa?
you saying yeah,
Okay. You're right.
that's all
So
right. No.
so just think about if somebody says, do you know a good psychologist? Do you know it could be somebody that an organization does use a lot, but often just to know where these are. If somebody said, I want to talk to somebody about my child's ADHD, knowing
Oh,
where,
so you want to know what? Yeah.
if they're having struggles with trying to find somebody, asking, I would be sending them to a GP to find out that. But there's also pediatric psychologists that work with young people, knowing where they are, their availability. Sarah's talking about food banks. If they're having struggles with affording food, definitely. Lisa?
Oh,
Somebody who's suffering depression and needs help with implementing exercise into their daily life, you could use an exercise physiologist. I actually use one, and they're really helpful.
Excellent. And what sort of things can they help you with?
Giving you small things to start off with, so you don't just overload yourself with something drastic and
Yeah.
making things worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a way to step into it, isn't it, before going gung ho?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you.
um,
Sarah?
yeah.
It wouldn't let me unmute that. What was I going to say? Oh, I know there's a centre near us in Toowoomba. It's called Harmony, and people can get referred there to do things like art therapy, and they do counselling and all that kinds of stuff. So I suppose knowing about things like that. But I think, as you said, just having a good, like, lots of people you can talk to, because the lady I see who supports me after 3 years of asking where I can go for help with transport and things, she's came to me last week and said, "Oh, I've just by accident discovered this thing. Some client I was talking to told me about this thing you can apply for." Like, I've asked so many people over the past 3 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just making sure you keep talking to everyone,
No,
not just relying on what you know. Share all your information with everyone.
no,
That's
that's
how
it.
networks work.
Yeah. What about Centrelink? Centrelink's they don't have everything, but Centrelink like has a
Yes.
one-stop place where everything's, well, not everything, but they have
Yeah.
things in there like different sources that the pamphlets, like instead of going from one place to another, they have a few things and tells you what you can get, what you're entitled to and what you're not, what
Yep.
services are available to you.
Definitely, because Centrelink even
Yeah,
have social workers there,
yeah.
and they can help you with your finances or your,
Well, that's
uh,
it. Yeah,
and helping you sort out, issues around health and
money.
working
Yeah.
and access. Yeah, definitely. That's a good one, very good one. Lisa?
I got help for myself and the two boys through the neighborhood center. They There was social worker um for me and the boys, and then there was like kind of like a support worker slash respite that used to take them out for an hour once a week, stuff like that. They have
Yeah.
like the neighborhood center, that the place has a couple of services that provide things like a social worker and mental health people, and some support workers that specialize in kids' mental health.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it
And
really
and
helps.
does that help too with the waiting period? Like, is it less waiting time?
Oh yeah, except for like the social worker had uh you go with them for a maximum of 9 months, but because of our circumstances, she actually got permission and it got extended to 13 months until we were on our feet and doing a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and Sarah's helped applying for NDS. It's so complicated. Yeah, it's very long. So this is where often too there are some services that actually help take you through that process as well. It's a tricky process when it can take a long period of time to gather the information as well, but families now are able to more access these and hopefully the appropriate services now that there is a commission looking into managing NDIS better. So these are just some of the things that we could think of. Oh, I think some of the other things too that are good around your play group, sharing neighbourhood centres where they are. Is there a local book club or coffee group that people could go to socialise? And specialist services as DVAC, and explain what DVAC is, Sarah, please.
Domestic Violence Action Centre. I don't know whether
Yeah.
that's just a Queensland thing or not, but that's what it's called here.
Different organisations in each state, but yes. Where are they? Where are advocacy groups that can help you advocate if you have an issue with housing or finances? Think about spur debts and things like that where you need some support and advocacy. So these are all good things that people might come in and ask you about. So gathering and reviewing that info, then think about, and definitely online support groups too. That goes a long way for, especially for if we're in regional or remote areas as well. But it's really good to be able to get information ourselves, which I subscribe to a lot of mailing lists to get their newsletters to find out what's going on. You'd be surprised some of the things that you see that's going on in the industry, especially in the mental health industry. And I think once you can have a few newsletters, even getting onto the mental health organisation per state, and finding out if there's a subscription you can get, monthly newsletters, getting on and just looking at organisations, what they're offering is another great way, and finding out what programs they're delivering for individual people, for families, because when we're looking at recovery programs for our participants, we have to think about their beliefs. Are they willing to go? The readiness to participate. How long would they have to wait if we do refer them over to somewhere? And if you gather that information before you do that, that's going to help your participant be able to access support quicker and giving them some background. Remember, informed choices here. But there are limitations to services, and most services have the benefit of options of variety. Sometimes there's limitations around that can actually become a barrier for some people, and sometimes, and we were just talking about long waiting lists, but for some people who use public transport, how do you get to a service? Now think about a young mum who's got 3 or 4 children at home and she might need to get counselling. How does she take, and she needs public transport. How do you take 3 or 4 little children with you, public transport on and off, prams, bags, children, It'd be very stressful just even doing that in that process. So this is where it's really good to think about, could you do telehealth for that person to alleviate that time? It's always good to also know that some neighbourhood centres do childcare for when people are having medical appointments. So one of the local neighbourhood centres near me actually has a support service for people who have a medical appointment and they only might need childminding for 1.5 or 2 hours. And often accessing somebody else, it's not there. So this service is there for them. So some of the neighbourhood centres do that in certain areas. But think about time constraints for people. And will the service be something that's going to benefit them? And one of the biggest things is can they provide ongoing support? Because often it's a 1 to 5 service delivery, and then that's it. The next you're moved on. So sometimes there's different complex needs that people need, and it might be something that it needs months and months of support with. So finding out what services actually offer that would be very good. No, the harm in setting somebody up to go and see someone and they get in there and I can only see you the once and then I won't be able to see you for another 3 months. That's really hard. That's really hard to support somebody, and you've started them on their journey and then it's going to come to an abrupt halt until there's more availability. So do find out about availability before you do that. So because we're considering the networks, the referral type, where geographically, financially, then think about how we use what we call a multidisciplinary approach. So when we're working with participants, we're bringing knowledge, skills, and when we say multidisciplinary, that means bringing in other people as well into that environment. So you could be having a caseworker, a social worker, a counsellor. You might even have art therapy, you might have emergency relief, and you might have focus groups and things like that. So that becomes a part of the multidisciplinary team. And it's a team that gets together and they share those knowledges and skills and fill in the gaps for the needs for the client. So that becomes a holistic approach. Excuse me. And the approach there is around creating a care plan for someone where you can bring in other people that meet the client's needs, that work well with the client as well, and are available. But having a team approach doesn't leave it all on one service to try and manage as well. And this is where partnerships in mental health in the sector are very good to be able to allow for the pooling of resources, increase service access and availability. And when that happens, that often helps an organisation create sustainability. And when you have sustainability, you can create more of a long-term support system for your participants. With partnerships, though, with other organisations, this is actually how, when you are establishing with them that you will be a partner in service delivery, that is about that mutual recognition that you're negotiating different roles. You understand different risks of relationships as well too, but you're looking at different strategies that you can create to meet the client's needs, and you must use documentation along the way. So, and when you document your process, you can gather in all your research as well. So a lot of organizations have a lot of different resources. So documenting what you've got as well is a good idea. But when you're building a partnership, the service accessibility can bring shorter waiting times for your participants. So if you're linking in with 2 or 3 different partners, that's a great way to have a holistic approach and a multidisciplinary, because you might link in with Centrelink, the local health centre, and here you are, a case management organisation for counselling and psychosocial support. So can fill in the gaps for your participants. That's what it's about. But you just have to do it in a professional way, that you do establish a process between you all as well. So let's have a look at a case study and see if we can see what sort of services, how can you work in a multidisciplinary approach. These are going to be the questions I'm going to ask you. So I'm just going to copy and paste those and put them into the chat when my mouse lets me do that. There we go. So the questions will be, how can Lauren work in a multidisciplinary approach? And what 3 people could Lauren approach to assist her in gathering information? All right. So let's have a listen to the case study. So Lisa is 18 years old, suffers from a depression, and has recently lost her support worker who was working with her for 2 years. The support worker has now retired. Lauren is the new support worker and is first going through Lisa's case notes to understand how best to support Lisa. Lauren notes that Lisa often will see her psychiatrist at her low points. She does attend TAFE part-time, studying floristry, and has a mentor for her TAFE course to help her studies and support her with those studies. How can Lauren work in a multidisciplinary approach here? Who would she be reaching out to build that network of support and understanding and sharing resources for Lisa? Lisa, can you tell me about Lisa, please?
Sure. Do you mean getting informed consent first, and then speaking with the psychiatrist and speaking with the mentor, and then also asking Lisa if she would like to have does she have a preference with a new support worker?
You're the new support worker,
Oh, okay. Oh, my
right?
bad.
So you've come in to work with Lisa, who did have a support worker, and you've taken over
Okay.
that role. And young Lisa also goes to TAFE and has a mentor at TAFE as well.
Yeah, so maybe communicate and speak with the psychologist and the mentor at TAFE.
Yes,
And
definitely.
ask Lisa if she feels that she would like any other services implemented.
Yes, definitely. But so I think you probably answered the second question. What 3 people could Lauren approach to assist her in gathering information of Lisa? We've talked about the mentor. We've talked about the is it psychologist? Hang on, recently is often a psychiatrist. Who else can you find out, Sarah?
GP.
Definitely, yeah. Lucy? Lucy, you got your mic off.
Sorry about that. I think you already might have mentioned it. The social worker before, how like where she was at before the last social worker left. Like
Yes,
what's the word?
the past support worker. Yes.
Yeah. Like
Yes.
I think you mentioned that, but does she feel anything else that she needs added to it, or what would she like herself, to succeed in what she's
Yeah.
doing, or does she need any other outside help, or that she hasn't been given, or to her, or any
Yeah.
suggestions that anything to make it easier for her?
Yeah. No, that sounds good. Sarah?
Well, I know if I got a new support worker, I would want her to spend time getting to know me first. So, and also, yeah, I think what Lucy was saying might be the same thing. Review your goals, because I know they normally do like reviews every 3 to 6 months, don't they, to say, have we achieved that goal? Is there any more goals that we want to work on? Yeah. Things like
Yes,
that.
yes, and that's including the person who's receiving that help. Holistic approach here, collaboration, gaining consent along the way. Now, let's have a look. Because it's all about making change. And no matter where you are in your life stage, change can happen. Often change is hard. But if we can work out who our support system can be, we can move forward. Now, there's a video in the recording coming out. There'll be a link to it. And this professor actually has an ABC Australian story on him as well. And he lived a long life living as a hermit and not associating with anyone, to end up becoming married, having children, and study his way through up to being a professor. And the stages that he went through only really happened when he got supports and got safe housing, and things started to change for him. So do watch it. I think it's about a 30-minute recording. All right. So excuse me. So let's go to breakout rooms, and we're going to look at in the case of, I'll just copy this. and put it into the chat here. So think about a young person who is homeless, starting from the age of 15. Then I want somebody at 25, somebody at 35, and somebody at 45. Where would you go to seek support for them for homelessness? What community service programs would you seek to support that person? We've got different life stages here. And how would you also support somebody if any of those people came to you and wanting anger management support? Because often anger is behind frustration, and frustration can make problems for people in the way they respond to others caring and supporting them. So, and often services don't want to work with certain people because they are quite aggressive verbally, which there's no need for that to happen in services, about respect for worker, respect for the client. But some people, if they had support with anger management to help them deal with multiple complex issues, where would you send somebody at 15, 25, 35, 45? All right, so I'm just going to stop share here. And okay. So Lucy, who were you in with? Sarah, wasn't it? Yep. So what did you discuss around what services you would use for a young person, 15-year-old for homelessness?
Well,
What did
we
you
find it
write?
hard to distinguish between the ages. We just kind of came up with a load of different.
Overall, like there's all different things, like housing, for instance. There's Anglican care community services, like for housing and that.
I suppose for a younger person, maybe foster care, hostels, which may be better for older people because they're not going to be as safe for someone younger. You've got Homelessness Australia, Mission Australia. You can go to the Red Cross and maybe your local church. They might be able to help find. The church might have like families that will take people in, and maybe that would be better for younger people too, because they're in a more.
Yeah, and what do they call it, where they have, like, you can walk in and then get meals, like not Meals on Wheels, but they come in and get people that are off the street and they've got nothing to eat, and they can go in and have a meal and
like a
stuff
soup
like that.
kitchen.
Yeah.
There's through the government, there's the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, which has youth homes housing services.
Lifeline too. There's a lot of different services like Beyond Blue and stuff like that, that like for anger management and that, or different resources and that there too as well.
Yep.
Foster care, shelters. Would it include also, well, I suppose going to Centrelink, you would get a social worker who then might be able to help as well and help them get all the benefits that they are entitled to, because they might not have that. And would it even include help them sort of put a resume together and try and help them find a job?
Yep.
That's
do
about
that
all we came up
holistic
with.
approach.
Yeah, because it'd be overwhelming for them too, like to go from one person to get for housing and then to get a place set up and that, and like if they go to Centrelink, the sort their own personal social worker can sort of steer them in the right direction, saying that, oh, you need this and that, and we'll make appointments. And that it's like their own support work. Yeah.
Definitely.
I suppose the
Well,
younger age group might need to learn more about life skills. They might not know how to look after themselves.
That's it.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yep. It's a big shock sometimes for some young people.
Oh, yeah.
Big shock for some older people too, who've never maybe always had a partner that's done it, and then they've
That's it.
become
No.
as well. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So Lisa, Margot, and Bron, what did you discover?
Lisa, you want to go first? Or do you want me to read it out?
Did you write it down?
Yeah, I wasn't sure because you were. So Lisa did most of the research. So Lisa started with looking at 15-year-olds first, and there was quite significant number of agencies from Queensland. That's where you looked it up. So housing provided by the government. So that was one of the initiatives was called Sleep Bus, where as long as you're under 25, you can get on a bus which is converted into sleeping arrangement, and there is a supervisor there. Youth of the Streets, so they provide services around different things that they need at different times. So it's not only housing, but just provide any sort of shelter, food, anything what they need, clothing or something. The general agencies coming up as Salvation Army and Red Cross, and they're very well established with different locations around the country. There was separate organization for different agents particular, and Lisa, you were saying that sort of giving exact sort of abbreviation to the name on the 45-year-olds had a website starting with how SS, so HOUSS, and that was to support people with mental health and disability, and that was for men and women. And then, do you have anything? Oh, ILD support was only for adult women to start with. So different agencies through the government, like New South Wales has Link to Home, but that's in general for adults. It didn't have a specific program for youngsters, but that's a huge number of people. It's not odd cases.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we found a lot for the 15-year-old age. When I looked up the ones for the 45-year-olds, and that had the least sort of choices, different places as the age bracket became older.
Yeah, and it does change, doesn't it? The options sometimes become less or very homogenized. Yeah,
But I think the Sleep Bus, like we have one in Harvey Bay, it's quite often posted about on the community Facebook page, and it is a very used and needed resource.
Wow. Yeah,
And
they're great fitted out things, aren't they? Like they're really like pods.
Yeah, and there's a supervisor there as well, which is really good, I think. And the local neighborhood center has food like breakfast, like on a Wednesday morning for homeless people. The church that I go to does morning breakfast, I think 3 times a week and for people in need, not just for homeless people as well.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Thank you. I think it's when you look at all that, that's a part of your holistic approach. Now you can see that there's some things that are age specific, and some things will be gender specific in certain areas, but it's still trying to think about where do you send somebody for the best support. Sarah?
I know I think it's in Toowoomba, it's called Tony's Kitchen. This man, Tony, has set up, it's a cafe, and I think homeless people can go there for food, but he also employs young kids that can be homeless, but kids in need, and he employs them. And I think he pays them, but not very much, but just to give them job experience
Yeah.
so that they can then go out and they develop skills like working in a cafe, cooking skills, and all that kind of stuff. So, so I think people can go in and buy, like it's like runs like a normal cafe, but then if someone goes in need of food, he can feed them.
There's some good programs out there with people doing some great work on the ground, helping others, getting skilled up. And I think there's a lot of these programs in schools too for young people. But it's finding these programs for older people to do as well. That's quite difficult. You can go and you might go to a specific job skilling and training, but some people have missed out the gaps on life skills as well. And that needs a different approach in how you're getting them job ready as well. All these are considerations. Let me just share my screen again. Good work there. Thank you. I think what would some of the services that surprised you about what they did? What was a standout for you? Lisa?
Just the amount of support for young people, the 15 to and 25-year-olds. There's just so much available for them out there, and it's so good to help them kind of reboot their life.
Yeah. Yes, because there can be a lot of family relationship breakdown. There's a lot of oppositional behaviors where young people will leave home because they don't want the restrictions, or often young people have missed a diagnosis. It might be under the neurodivergent umbrella, where the struggle with having to live with different things in society make them want to break free. Other young people, unfortunately, are sent from their homes, kicked out of their homes. So it's great to see that there is programs out there, but why is this still happening in our society? That's what I ask. A struggle. So for you to be working with different people will also come with the challenges that people will want to make a complaint and go through the complaint process. And this is a negotiation here around how you support people, because each organisation will have their own policies and procedures on how you implement a complaint process. And if it's around conflict, around maybe if for somebody not getting the service that they want or were told was going to happen, think about how you would approach and support somebody to be able to make the complaint process. And here it talks about these steps that you would go through. And you would do the negotiation, and you have to prepare your paperwork. You have to ensure that you've got everything in processes. So a complaints process is a formal process here too. So every organization has a certain complaints process and actual paperwork that must be followed and submitted as well. So you have all these defining rules around what you can and cannot say, what you're having the conflict about. Everything has to be clarified too. So really clear instructions on the information. And when you're writing, it's very clear and what we call succinct. There's not prettying up the words. We're not embellishing the words. We're not changing them and bringing emotion into them. We have to focus on what the issue was, how it came about, what the main cause for complaint is, and getting those persons' direct words. And this is where taking good case notes, writing down those issues, having good listening skills whilst you're getting this information to be able to put it together for somebody who needs to be able to activate their right to complain, and you help them advocate and seek out support and assistance to go that way, because it's about making sure that they get rights to service. But if a complaints process needs to happen, how have we supported them to be able to action that? Lisa?
With like writing down the issues and stuff and writing down everything as you're in, say, a meeting with the client, do many people, workers, or are they allowed to, with consent from the client, to voice record the meeting and explain why to the client so that you get everything, so you're active listening at the same time instead of just trying to do both, like active listening and writing down and then just like losing the plot?
Yeah. And it is hard to take notes that way. And it is a good option to be able to record it as long as you've got permission
Yeah.
to record, and you've signed an agreement on what happens to that recording as well, around that
cool.
confidentiality. But often having a session recorded will be also then that recording given to the individual who's in that session as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a good idea though, because some counsellors actually recorded sessions so they could go back and do their notes. But often the clients weren't given a copy of that. It was for just the counsellor themselves, even though the client was aware that it was being recorded. But I think in these instances, often it's also good to have a third party
Okay.
there in the room as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
I know when I witnessed 2 complaints processes, they actually had social work students in there taking the case notes on them and helping
All right.
yeah, I've seen that in process. Bron?
That's pretty cool.
I'm assuming in this circumstance too, you need to be more empathetic than sort of normal, so you don't look like you're siding with someone as well, or a co-worker or whoever they're making the complaint against.
Definitely you need to be non-biased, non-judgmental, but also being aware that you're supporting somebody to be able to express their concerns. And this is where your supporting can go, where you can direct that focus to help them stay on track and on task. Because often if you're bringing up a complaint, the emotions there from people around how they felt and the what's happened to them, how's that look, what's the outcome been for them. So those sort of things are really important around that as well. All righty. I'm just going to press pause there. Welcome back, everyone. Oh, gosh. So what should you include in a complaints process? Let's have a look at this one. Just press pause. It can't. Right. So how do you, as a mental health worker, develop working relationships, and what is the benefit going to be for you in the long run here? So as mental health workers, working collaboratively with others forms part of that person's care network. And then when you just establish that developing working relationship, you have to initiate that contact. So it's like a method, a process, which seems to be standard across the industry around initiating that contact. That could be making an official time to go and visit an organisation, sending an email to introduce yourself and then be able to then go and talk to the organisation, introduce yourself, what your organisation you work for does and supplies, and what you're seeking to help create a more holistic approach for your participants. What's the benefits for them and you? Sharing information, what's that going to get them and what's that going to get you and your organisation? How can you share that? Can it be done by phone, email, newsletters, things like that? Often the geographic resources here are around, excuse me, even the buildings that you're in. You can share rooms and resources and activity centres and things like that, groups, network groups, and you can actually share those sort of resources as well. And if your organisation is changing and adding programs, it's your job then to update those network people as well, because then you've got another resource to share, and it's good for them to know, for their participants to know that things have changed as well. So when you're addressing somebody's needs, holistic approach again. And the purpose of doing this is so you can monitor someone and watch their behavior changes when you do this, when you're supporting someone. And often the physical needs and the purpose of that change over time. Safety needs for people change. And what is the purpose of needing to create new safety plans, especially as we know in the domestic and family violence situations? What love are they gaining? Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs around, and we talked about, food, shelter, but then love, nurturing, care, relationships. All these things matter. And when you bring them into your practice to help somebody realize that they can have these things as well, bringing in their network people, their people can often help fill these gaps here. So there's another type of networking that you could help them find to help fill these needs as well. But as a mental health worker, you need to also be aware of your ethical, legal, and professional responsibilities here, and knowing the boundaries that exist and when you need to seek assistance from others for this. And how do you know what those boundaries are? Well, you'll certainly have your job description. And that job description should give you some scope on what you were doing. This person down here, the supervisor, is certainly somebody who can tell you what your job description is and those boundaries around that. And think about when you get onboarded. You get given policies and procedures around what work roles are, what your duty of care is, what legal and ethical considerations your organisation follows. Are they under the Mental Health Act that requires them to do certain things as a healthcare worker, mental health care worker? What legal body are you under to ensure that your practices are up to date? So that's ensuring that you've got all your registration and your workers' checks. All these things matter. But understanding where you have its limitations and what is the boundary existing around exactly what you do. It's really important to understand those, to understand that you're not going to go over servicing, and you understand that when you're working with somebody's care plan, you're not going to be able to be everything in that plan. You need to outsource. You have external supports for that. And this is why referring and having networks out there where you can bring in those resources help you stay within your role limitation. So let's have a look at, I'm just going to stop. All right, so let's do an activity, and we're going to look at brainstorm, excuse me, a type and need or purpose listed behaviours that that a client may show that tells you their needs and purposes. So for the psychological, what type of behaviors would a person demonstrate if there were psychological problems happening for that person? What would you see physically on them? So if somebody was having an episode, what would you see happening, Lisa?
Withdrawal,
Yeah.
like withdrawing from you and the communication that you're trying to have with them. They would
Yes.
keep themselves closed in more than opened and active.
Yep. Definitely. Sarah?
Their body language can often be like closed in and looking down and no eye contact. Basically just being
Yep.
coming into themselves.
Yep. You can see them closing in. Yep. Bron?
Anger and frustration,
Yep.
not being able to control themselves. And it could be the complete opposite, where they're not closed in, they're just aggressive and don't know how to deal with what's happening.
That's true. That's true. Because everyone is individual. Always remember that.
Yeah,
Lucy?
or slurring of their words.
Yeah. Lucy?
Being fidgety and acting in not in a normal way like they normally be in a session where you've being in a calm way, like acting out abnormal, like what they normally are, different.
Yeah. And those different behaviors. Sometimes people rock backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
And a hint here, sometimes when clients have not had enough water and they're dehydrated, what happens to their brain? So some behaviors can even represent that.
Yeah.
Margot?
It's lack of self-care, poor clothing, not being present in the room, so not really asking for something, just turning up but not really knowing what they want. So it's a matter of that establishing the contact to get more out of a client. But
Definitely.
that would be the physical symptoms. I think it's always in the description, even of the GP or a specialist, is like, how do you speak? Do you speak faster? Do you speak slower? Are you staying on topic? Are you distracted? That's something out of that initial records. That would be something that would stay. Yeah, something along those lines.
Definitely. And like you say, that the different appearance, the way they're speaking, the way they're taking information in and giving it back out, it could be totally different in their wording. What would be an example around a safety behavior that somebody might display that tells that their needs are not being met? The biggest one here, and we did this, you have mentioned it, a couple of you did, was around that withdrawing back. Because as soon as you talk about in the word safety, you're bringing in that, do I trust you? So for somebody who has big trust issues and they don't know, they will withdraw back until they understand that safety will be in that space. So sometimes that takes a while to happen as well. All right, so how do you know that the participant, your client, is sliding in the areas of love? What behaviors that may they demonstrate if they're lacking in love? Bron?
Neediness, like needing to be reassured more, or sort of needing more attention. Maybe.
Yes, and that can be quite suggestive because it's love.
Yeah.
So they might want hugs. They might be suggestive in their remarks around how they connect with you with love. So they might be putting it onto that worker around, and I'm your special person. You know that.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Sarah?
And you are my family.
Yes, yes. Sarah?
You could be the total opposite though, because if you've never had love, you don't know what love is. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah. Because I know I'm not saying that I never had love, but I personally, and I know there's a lot of people like that, they don't want touch. They're the total opposite.
And that sometimes that lack of affection can create, like you say, a barrier to wanting it, or others try to demonstrate that they want it. Margot?
I think you'll be having difficulty to separate being wanting that contact more frequently. So can I see you earlier, like instead of a monthly appointment, can I see you next week?
Yeah.
Not wanting for this connection to finish, and then if there is any change, like change of a psychologist or change of caseworker, there will be whole matter of sort of despair and kind of everybody leaves me. I'm not going to handle that. I need more notice, kind of desperation.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sad to see because you can see there's such a gap for that person. Bron?
I find it sometimes with myself with work, some of the clients are very sort of touchy-feely and they want to hug you at the beginning, at the end. I'm not that huggy, touchy-feely person, but you also don't want to offend them, but I also don't want to give across the wrong idea as well. So it's trying to find this happy medium, or sometimes I'll do like a fist pump or something like that instead, which is and some of them, want to hold you really tight as you walk through the shops. I don't like that personally. But in the Turkish community too, they're used to that, and a lot of touching and hugging and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's where talking about clear boundaries is important here too. Lucy?
Are you talking about with the social worker and the client, like getting too emotional with the social worker, like getting too clingy with the social worker, as in love, or you're talking
not
about
so much in love, but seeking
maybe that's the
that
wrong word.
sort of affection from them because they're lacking it. Yeah. So, that person,
I know it.
you're so good to talk to, and you're the only one that understands me, and I wish you were a part of my family. And so they're trying to fill a gap, a need here, right?
Because that can get sometimes in a dangerous way too, and then they start getting too stalking, like too emotionally involved.
Yes. That's where it can go for sure. They start looking at somebody's Facebook page or trying to follow social media things, and this is where it's also very careful for us in the industry working, in that you don't have that sharing of
Profile.
that profile in that it's only those people that you want in, be involved in. And that's when you don't also put things personal kind on those sort of platforms, because it can always be seen from somewhere else. So,
Oh,
so sorry, Sarah. Yep.
This is just a random question, not really related to mental health workers, but as like all kinds of like teachers, doctors, everyone, should teachers and things make Facebook friends with their parents, in your opinion?
Oh, well, I suppose that's a different sector we're sort of talking about, but as in if it was in the mental health sector with a client and just say you'd known that client for quite a while, right? So the blurring of worker, friend, client, no, it's still not something that you do, because it breaches a barrier around what your practice is when you're doing that. I think about people who are in small country towns too. It's quite awkward to not share some of that information, because in a country town, everybody knows everybody, and your service might be one of the main services there that do multiple things, but you could be working with people that you're at the football games with because of your children and things like that. It's still keeping that Facebook page secure enough for you to have those boundaries, and you would have those professional boundaries. When I'm at the football, I have my mum hat on. I'm not a worker here. So this is where it's clear to people that they don't come up and start talking to you and want therapizing or asking about supports, or so those good boundaries, make sure that you have them. So, well, hang on. When you're making referrals, actually, we'll go back to that one, the boundaries around. Remember, we talked about the job description. In your work policies and procedures, those boundaries would be there as well. And around, because you'd have a role description, you could then be telling your participants, this is what I do, this. These are my boundaries around what I can do. I can then get you support to do this, but I am not here to be your best friend, or as in a friend and in a friendship relationship. This is a therapeutic relationship. So this is where understanding your job position description is really important as well. So how do you make referrals for people? In thinking about all those processes we just talked about, how does that matter? Why does it matter that we need to have those considerations in place when we make referrals? So if we're consulting somebody to another service, have we thought about that person's behaviors? Will that organization be able to work with that as well? Will that organization, that program you're sending them to, be able to meet their needs? Because this is when you're working in a holistic approach here. And if you're doing a referral, which, you go along and you do all these processes here, you gain the person's consent, explain why it's needed, and that person gives you that consent to share that information. But then how are you telling the organization that this person might have certain behaviors to be concerned for, or they have certain needs? How is that identified? And that's with sharing case notes and things like that. But our steps here must be nice and clear around, if we're going to make referrals, really sharing that referral information with our participant first. Discuss what they do and all the options. Like we talked, the things that matter. Is it going to cost me? What's the time frame waiting for this? How am I going to get there? Can it be covered by Medicare? Do I need a different type of referral to get there? Can I get a mental health plan? How is that going to meet my needs? Is that in my plan, in my wellness plan? All these things you talk to somebody about before you make those moves ahead. And I think when you're doing referrals too, often people will question, can I still come back here? And if you're the case manager, you'll still have contact with them to ensure that all the other supports are put in place. Don't forget, you've become somebody that they've trusted with that information as well. So often keeping in contact, a check-in, even once a fortnight, to see how they're going with their new referrals and still making sure that they're following their plan. It's very important. And for you to undertake reviews in your organisations, if we're looking at the referral process, it needs to consider what we were just talking about and what policies and procedures are in place. And if you're a number of reasons people will have reviews in services is because a standard policy for support plans might have been changed. So then you have to review how they're working. A client or a family member has requested that to review the organisational policies and procedures and how you refer somebody. They might have requested, I want to know all the details in your referral process. So how are you gathering information? How are you gaining consent? How will you keep our family members' information confidential? All these things are their right to know. And in that paperwork, if there's incident reports that the client has harmed themselves in any way, it's important to know that that information is shared, but only by consent of the person. So if you're referring somebody for psychological support, so psychiatrists and psychologists, or they're going to a support group and they might have self-harming behaviour, think about their reactions when changing services. And this also goes for when somebody's made a complaint process. If we go back to that complaint process we're talking about that people can do, this is where you often see some of these behaviours come out as well. And because they're reacting to a change. And many people can do that because they're changing the space that they've learnt to trust, and they don't deal with change too well. Now, when you're doing the referral process here, you decide if you need to be making improvements or changes to that, because that process should involve reassessing the individual's goals and their progress, so like in their wellness plans, and reassessing the strategies that are in place, and are they working? Are they measuring up? Are they supporting each other? And modifying some timelines in those practices. Are they meeting those timelines that you had in the wellness plan or the recovery plan? Are they meeting their goals? How are you changing them? And what sort of process are you going through to change those to meet the needs of the client as well? All these are about making improvements for your participant and participant/client. But think about when you're reviewing your processes here, it can give you a guideline of what's working for the participant, for the organization, and for yourself. What would be one thing that you would see that you would gain from reviewing your referral processes here? If you were in a mental health support organization and you're a case manager and you were referring over to somebody for food and behavior management around food, so maybe going to the Butterfly Foundation because they might be either just displaying behaviors that are either bulimia or having a poor relationship with food and not wanting to eat and shut down, things like that. Lisa?
Reviewing the information, if it's the correct information, the right amount of information, and if it's the right person that you're referring them to.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. What else would you put in place around if you're assessing that referral? What about the individual's position on things? Bron?
If they're starting to improve, or if they seem happy and open to be using those services, and if they're not, working with them to either see if you can do it together or find a different referral system for them.
Definitely. And what behaviors are they giving back to you to show you that it's working or it's not working? So you'll be able to see from those reactions. And often we have to look at changing the timeline of accessing other services as well. So sometimes somebody's not ready to do that. Sometimes somebody's not ready to have another change. So that's another
And they need to
consideration.
rebuild that rapport, wouldn't they? And that trust up with that people. So it may take longer than what you originally thought.
It often can. And sometimes for people, things don't happen fast enough, but then their connection to somebody is crucial built on trust and safety.
Yeah.
And that takes time. What are your behaviors? What are you doing to show them that it is a safe place? You know, you're working with empathy. You're trying to reassure somebody. You're giving people the space to talk, encouraging them to share, talking about confidentiality and privacy, and that helping them build that space and understanding of what your processes are about and services are. But is it working for that participant? And when we do that review, often it's really good to have the review from the participant as well. How do you make improvements? You've got to find what is and is not working. Any questions so far? I'm just going to stop share there. I'm just going to pause for a minute.
Press
So let's have a look at some of the tasks here for CHCMHS004. So task 1 is 17 questions. And this is asking about 4 different types of care networks and services to assist a client with mental illness. Explain what factors you would need to consider in the terms of availability and appropriateness. We've been discussing that tonight. You're going to research and identify a couple of local services you could refer clients to. And you're going to answer scenarios, answer how records are managed and kept safe from unauthorised access. So sometimes here, I know when I was in housing, to access anything on the Queensland Housing platform, we had to email in and get a special code. And that code only lasted for a certain period of time, I mean hours. And if you left that code, you got into the platform and you might have been putting in information on somebody who was seeking housing and looking for housing from all the other services that are in the district. And this is a program that Queensland Housing have. And housing agencies all access that to find out any available stock of housing in the district and apply for it. And that code lasted a certain time. If you didn't get on and use that system for a period of 10, 15 minutes, just say you went out to get a cup of coffee, you might have had a break, come back in, locked out. You've got to go through the whole process again, get another code, get back in. So some things are really strict, how you access records. Just to give you a hint on some of them. Other organisations, in your learner guide, there's information on that too. And what pieces of legislation would you need to adhere to in regard to client information? Think about that good old Privacy Act. What year was it made in? And what else? Think about in regard to client information, where you're going to store them. What sort of legislation is that under? And you're going to identify the mental health legislation must adhere to in your line of work. So imagine you as a mental health worker here. What would you be guided by? What mental health act is in your state or territory? Let's have a look at some of these. Describe the concept and importance of peer support. What does a peer support person do? Let's put it out there. What does a peer support person do? Do we know? There's somebody who works with lived experience, aren't they? So when they're talking about how can they assist with empowerment, if there's somebody coming from a lived experience of something, how are they going to then empower others? Ron?
How do you sort of do that without sort of then putting your views and what worked for you onto the client then, and keeping that, making them making their own decisions and not taking over from what you've lived?
Good question, that one, because it's about sharing some, not all of the information. Okay. So in the example of AOD, per se,
yeah,
that lived experience, understanding the the heartbreak maybe of losing family, friends, becoming isolated, that dependency and need, that urge to want more, you can't stop, the hopelessness that some people feel. They may have experienced all of that, but a way to approach that as a peer worker is, I've had a similar experience. And some of the things I put into practice were, and talk about the things that they might have done. They didn't go into their whole story. But there are processes where group work might do that, where the peer workers might talk about their story, but it's not something that they measure up against for the participant. It's about, I have a knowing, I've been there in some sense. I can have a sense of what you're going through because what I went through was similar, but it's more identifying the strategies and how you made it through. What did you do? Who did you access? How did you find support? That's what you can share. All depending on the criteria from the organisation as well, around peer support worker. Because peer support is about somebody who can stand beside somebody and understand what it's like to be in their shoes in some sense. So sharing an experience is also about sharing strategies to come through that experience, because you're about building hope and empowerment here. So let's have a look at some of what is the importance, the role of formal services in a client's recovery? So let's explain the differences. What's an informal support compared to a formal support? Does anybody know what informal supports are, Lisa?
Maybe like an art therapy group.
Similar. It can be informal in its processes, but in the areas of formal and informal support, informal is the family, the friends, the close networks of people, because they're not geared to an organisation. Whereas it's formal, could be the art therapist, it could be the psychologist, it could be the GP, it could be the counsellor. That's more formal because it's got a formal referral process to it. But when it's informal, those informal supports, that is your network of your people. So why is that important to have formal services in a client's recovery? Why would you think that's important? Ron?
Because it's off evidence-based theories and stuff. It's not just a sort of like a hippie sort of point of view. I probably didn't say that the right way.
But I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
You've got experienced, learned people who have gone through the processes and met standards to be able to do what they do as well. Lucy? You got your mic off, Lucy?
Sorry about that. I'm like, formal, like more resources and more access to things to go to than informal. Does that make sense or not?
Can you say that again for me?
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say now. Oh, I need the question repeated, please.
All right. So what is the importance and role of formal services
No,
in a client's recovery? So why do we refer to formal services?
because there's more resources for the client that can go to. Like, there's all these different services depending on what the services the client needs, and better access for them to go to than in informal services. Informal services, just like your family, friends, or whatever, but formal services is more services that they can go to get help.
Yeah, that meet the client's needs.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's have a look. Social justice principles. Describe social justice principles as they apply to your work, and how would you ensure that you apply these principles when providing service to your clients or participants? So social justice, what is social justice? Has anybody got a definition of social justice? This is where it's really good to be able to, when you look at these questions, understanding the directive words here. Lisa?
Is that where it's along the lines of inclusion and social justice, where they're being socialized?
Yeah, so it's where how can I put it?
Something,
Equal.
like not keeping
Sorry.
them isolated, helping them get out and being in activities and stuff like that. Maybe not. I'm tired.
Everyone deserves an equal access to the service, no matter what the political flavour is or the socio-economic climate is. And it's about opening doors for everyone to have access, not just a particular group of people. Because the principles of social justice are about access to resources, equity, participation, diversity, and human rights. So yes, Lisa, you were on the right tracks here in that. But if you're thinking about, when you look at that question, social justice principles, so why are the principles of diversity and human rights and equity of services, access to services, why is that important? Why should we apply that?
To make everyone be treated equally and fairly.
Yes, yes. And there's one word for that, inclusiveness. Or there's
Yeah,
a
I know that
couple
one.
where a lot of people talk about inclusiveness of diversity.
Hmm.
So when you're talking about diversity, it's not just about culture, it's about all different things about about a person. So those diverse things that make all of us here different. We all live in different environments. We all think differently. So there's diversity here in this one classroom. And it's all about having equal access to something. So we've all got now, right at this moment, equal access to learning. So if there wasn't equal access, people would be without. It's important that you ensure that inclusiveness into your practices. As Lisa said, everyone has a right to that service. Let me just stop there and I'll go and grab task 2. All righty. All right, so here's task 2. It's a case study. And, excuse me. This is about Elke, who's a Sudanese woman living with complex mental health needs, having experienced trauma in her home country. She has 6 children, and the oldest is 9 years old, so they're not very old. They're very close in age. Her husband's employed, and he mainly works nights. So her recovery plan goals include getting support with the children to reduce her stress levels and to access English classes. Think here. How is she going to access English classes with 6 children? Start thinking. The mental health worker, Alira, recognises that there are a number of issues impacting on Elke's ability to comply with the strategies which fall out of the scope of her role. So Alira, who's a mental health support worker, is already starting to see gaps in her service of how she can help this person. Alira seeks consent from Elke to refer her on to some specialist and external support services. So not just your specialist as in psychologists and things. External support services are around psychosocial needs. So what are some of the things here that can you identify that could be barriers preventing Elke from seeking support? Lisa?
Her mental state and capacity because of her mental state.
Yes, definitely. Bron?
The trauma that she's already had in her home country, and then coming to a new country, then with 6 kids, and the pressure of just being there for them and putting herself last.
Yes. Lucy? You've got your mic, Lucy. Can you see your mic there, Lucy? All right. So let's have a look at some of these things here. I'll let you work out your mic, Lucy.
No, it's all right. It's just my
Oh, there, yes, she got it.
my computer went blank and I couldn't see anything, so I didn't know
All
how
right.
to get it back. Language barrier, her language would be a bit hard to talk to different people and how to access things because as English is not she hasn't got proper English, like she can hardly speak English, accessing English at all.
Exactly. That's another barrier. Now, the other barrier here, and it's right in front of you all. She has 6 children. The oldest is 9. They're going to be from baby right up to nearly every age group up to 9. So they're very close. And she's wanting to reduce her stress levels and access English classes. What could she do? What could Alira do to help Elke be able to do this? Lisa?
Access childcare service.
Yes. And it could be like those short-term care services. Often neighbourhood centres do that. Margot?
I often see English classes by the church that often offers childcare classes. Like you can bring the kids with you. It's like mums with bubs, or
Yes.
kids have special activities during holidays, and they don't require religious affiliation. It's just more local area kind of support mothers in general. So apart from the church, it might be services either in that neighborhood hub center or TAFE. TAFE offer classes as well.
Yes.
So that
And
would be
they
free of
often
charge.
offer childcare too.
Yeah. So I feel for her already. It's like hopefully it would work out. One of these three.
Yeah. But these are the things that she would need to consider. Sarah?
I don't know whether this even exists, but the kids are quite young and I would say they go to bed relatively early. Would there be like night classes that you can do online?
Would be. But just remember her partner's working at night. So it might be quite late before she could get everyone in bed. It might be 8:30, 9 o'clock. If the partner's then gone to work, then they're only at that age that there's still things to do to prepare. So it sounds good in theory, but then when you think about she's on her own at night, so then she would be the one that's getting things ready for the next day, wouldn't she? Bron?
They might be able to help out with like house cleaning or something like that to reduce her stress, and maybe even some meals that are prepared as well
Yes.
for the family.
Yes, and that's where your local neighborhood group or
Yeah.
your a support group that usually can be run by your local church group, your Lions Club, places like that that can support people. Definitely, but I think Margot mentioned it where you can go to sometimes your local services have English classes and they'll have play group for the children and have somebody there to do activities with the children whilst you're doing some lessons. A great way to holistic approach here. But then there's one glaring problem here. If she has to go anywhere with 6 children, how is she getting there? Not necessarily meaning they'd have a car. Bron?
Bus or a Kia Carnival, I'm assuming.
Sorry?
A bus or a Kia Carnival if they do have a car. Or
Yeah.
She probably just doesn't leave the house. So yeah, you'd have to look at transportation for her.
It could be that, or it could be something that if you were lucky enough to be able to walk to, if you weren't, how could you help them get public transport with the children?
That one's harder because they're so young. So
Yeah.
to do it on her own, well, but in saying that too, in a lot of those Sudanese Tongans and stuff like that, why the oldest is only 6, they've also had to grow up and be responsible for the younger ones too.
We certainly don't leave them that responsibility at all, for sure.
No.
Sarah?
With services like Anglicare, because they definitely no, that's a bad idea because they won't transport kids. No. But someone could also teach her to do things like online shopping, because if her English isn't very good, and she obviously can't get to the supermarket very easily. They'll help with things like that.
And it could be about having an external childcare worker come to the home.
I was just thinking that a babysitter.
Mm. Could be something like that. But think about if you're going to get English as a second language classes, organise that it's somewhere that has transport, childcare, which often your TAFEs or your local community services run groups like that with that in mind. And sometimes they would often have a minibus to get people to the services as well. Lisa?
I just have a question. If Elkie is really not good at speaking English, then how
Mhm.
is Alara understanding her needs?
Google
Good question.
Translate.
That's a good question. What would you do?
Probably an interpreter.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
yeah, it's just that it doesn't say anything like that in the question. I was just wondering.
No, but you're right, because an access to English classes there's a big enough hint, isn't it?
Well,
So
yeah.
she might understand English, but she'd not be able to say a lot back, maybe. But the quickest thing, and I've learnt that most of us have a phone.
Yeah.
You can have Google Translate apps on your phone, and you can speak into it, and it will come out in text in the language you want.
Okay.
And you can do that immediately there with your participant in front of you. So then they're reading that and then they go, right. So when they speak back, that translate that back into English.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do
it's a
you have
process, but it's done there and then.
do you have to get permission from the client to do that though?
You ask about them having a translator service. And would you like to do app? Because quite a few people have already using this sort of thing if they've come to a strange country that, well, not strange, but they come to a strange place of the dialogue's different, the way of life's different. So often they will use a phone, already have that in play. But yes, get permission, would you like to use that? Or you might have to get the phone translator, call up the
Yeah.
translator service, the TIS.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Lucy?
Yeah, I just had a friend, people that live across the road, they're Mexican, and his mum is Spanish. And I've had fun time trying to translate the Spanish language. I'm just doing the Spanish recording, and then I've just got the new phone. Now I've just done, like I can speak English and it goes translates into Spanish. But now she's got to set it up from her end of the phone so that when I ring up, mine will be English and it will just translate into Spanish. And I've got my part of it done. Now we just got to set her up and it'll be fine. But this Google Translate, it's so hard. But since that service, I reckon it'd be a lot easier to use that. It really would.
And it's instant.
Oh yeah,
If
definitely.
you're going to get the
You don't have to go
translator
Google
service,
Translate.
yeah. And it
Yeah, you
actually,
don't have to go Google Translate, copy, paste, bang, this.
but in doing this process, you're actually building rapport with somebody too. You're showing them what you'll do to help
Oh
understand,
yeah.
Definitely. Sarah?
Oh yeah. Sign language, all sorts. Fun.
I don't, I know in Toowoomba there's a huge Sudanese community, so you could maybe try and put her in touch with someone in the Sudanese community that can speak English, that can meet up for, come to her house and meet up for coffee and slowly help her with the kids. And
Yes,
yeah,
a great idea. You know, a, a community that she'd be able to communicate with and learn about the wider community for sure. Ron?
I use Google Translate a fair bit with work. My first clients were all Turkish. I use it all the time. But a lot of them already have their mobiles set up that it's in Turkish. Everything comes across in Turkish to them. And then when they give me their phone, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. But you can go into all the new phones now and switch it across. But I've also had a little bit of, we through the Scout group, sent a whole heap of kids to the Jamboree. And in our Scout group, we do have a Sudanese family. The other thing I can say, regardless on how open cultures are coming, a lot of people aren't nice to Sudanese people as well. So you have to be aware that they do get a lot of flack and stuff, and they see a lot of them, and especially the teenage kids, and it's not always a nice. So trying to be able to educate people at the same mind as well.
Being open, being inclusive. This is what we want those practices doing. Right? Always think about inclusive of diversity. So what are two important factors that a leader should take into consideration when referring an individual to another service? We've just been discussing one. Language barrier. Think about that. What else would you need to take into consideration? Right?
Location and how far away and how to get her there, or to get the services to her.
Yep. Margot?
So interpreting services or otherwise, so language barrier, and then need for childcare or engagement for the kids. So if it's just helpful with looking after the kids.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And you've got another case study here with Ellie. Let me so I can pull that down. So Ellie started a new job as a care coordinator in a mental health care sector. On the first day, she was quite overwhelmed as soon as she realised that not only does she have to learn all about individuals who, pull that down, who access service, but she must establish relationships with key providers and the services in the district. So as part of Ellie's orientation, a colleague named Kieran gives Ellie a rundown on some of the local services and contacts. So Kieran explains to Ellie that her relationship with others in a person's care network will allow her to better meet the needs of the individuals accessing the service. This is what we've discussed tonight around how do you network, how do you collaborate with others. Karen explains to Ellie that there are many different kinds of working relationships, and that is very important to follow their organisation's confidentiality, consent, and documentation. Ellie takes all of this information in her stride and sets out to better understand her role and the role of others in both multidisciplinary teams, talked about that tonight, and the role of others within service user care networks. Now, what are 3 ways that Ellie can find out information about local service options? We talked about that tonight too. Talked about going to the service. We've talked about introducing yourself to the service, maybe getting into a network meeting once a month, using pamphlets, flyers, accessing resources online. All these things here can support that. All right, so let me just stop share there. And we might, hang on, we'll just see what else. Oh, sorry, we've got one more scenario here on this assessment. And this one's about Tom. And, excuse me. So Tom is a 20-year-old male diagnosed with anxiety and depression. His general practitioner gained his consent to refer him to a mental health support service. As part of that service, a care coordinator named Dee works with Tom to help link him in with support that will help him achieve his goals. And Dee has explained to Tom that he will require a range of services to best support his needs, and that the support strategies may need to change as Tom changes or he sets new goals. In order to provide Tom with the best possible support, Dee arranges for the team to complete a service gap analysis. This analysis involves discussing how Tom is going and identifying any unmet needs along the way. So let's have a look here. So why is it important for Dee to identify Tom's unmet needs? What would happen if you don't identify somebody's needs? What would happen to them personally? What would happen to Lisa?
They won't progress in their recovery.
Exactly. Yeah. Margot?
So it's about client-centered needs and goals. So without the needs, the goals wouldn't be met. So until the client doesn't identify what they want to work on, what do they need, they would not be ready to change. They would not be able to talk about something and connect with the service provider.
Definitely. Yep. You lose that whole gap. You lose basically everything. Lucy?
Margot just said what I was about to say. Yeah, well, if you don't know, yeah, basically what Margot just said, I mean, if you don't know if you don't have an update, then you don't know what needs to be what he needs to work on, or how to update, whether he needs more work on one area than the other, sort of thing. You wouldn't, yeah.
Definitely. What are 3 ways that Dee can identify Tom's unmet needs? We've talked about that tonight. And who's the most important person here? Tom. But who else can they identify with? So go back to the scenario. Tom has changes, set new goals. Dee arranges for the team to complete a service gap analysis. So first of all, as part of the service, a care coordinator works with Tom to help him link him with support. So what would be happening here? Lisa?
You could ask the GP.
Yep, could be, definitely. Yep. Wrong question, there it is. What are 3 ways that Dee can identify Tom's unmet needs? If he's had a referral from somewhere else as well, think about I think the question states Tom's general practitioner gained his consent to refer him to a mental health support worker. So we have the GP, we have Tom. Who would be an informal person in Tom's life?
His parents,
Yeah,
family,
yeah.
friends.
If he gave consent, of course. And what are 3 signs or behaviours that could indicate that Tom has unmet needs? We were talking tonight around that processes of people having barriers and blocking themselves off to service, and some of their behaviours, their actions, their responses. Think about all those there. So we will bring unpack task 3 next week because it's nearly 9 o'clock. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe, stay warm. Look at the big cold fronts coming through everywhere.
No, freezing.
Yes, I saw the temperatures going crazy. So please take care and look after yourselves. And
you too. Look after that eye of yours.
yeah, yes. It's you know, I'll get better. All right. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.
Helen, when do those questions land? The new tasks, will they come tomorrow?
Sorry?
When did the new questions and stuff come onto our system?
Oh, you
Is that
haven't got
tomorrow?
them?
Oh, this morning
No,
I
there's
didn't
no
have it.
questions. Yeah, there's no assessments showing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that the easiest thing would be to do is email lso@haiderinstitute.edu.au and let them know.
What
Okay.
questions are you talking about? What?
The ones that she's
Sorry.
just gone through.
Oh, right. Yep. All right.
Okay. So
I've had mine.
I'll
Have you?
just stop record here, everyone. I'll just stop
Yep.
record.